just to return briefly back to AOC and Bernie
Right.
Sanders, what are your thoughts about these modern political figures that represent some of these ideas? And they sometimes refer to those ideas as democratic socialism.
Right. The crucial thing about Bernie and about AOC, and this is particularly true about Bernie, because AOC is much younger and Bernie's an older man. Bernie, being roughly my age, has been around formatively as a student, as an activist, and then coming up through the ranks in Burlington, Vermont as a mayor and all the rest. He lived through what, for lack of a better term, I would call Cold War America. And the taboo in Cold War America, running from around 1945, 6 to the present, I mean, really never stopped, was a Manichaean worldview. The United States is good, it defines democracy, and the Soviet Union is awful, it defines whatever the opposite of democracy should be called. Good here, evil there. It was taken so far that even among the ranks of academic individuals, it was impossible to have a conversation. I mean, I can't tell, just make it very personal. The number of times I would raise my hand in my classes at Harvard or Stanford or Yale, and I would ask a question that had something to do with Marxism because I was studying it on my own. There were no courses to teach this to me except by people who trashed it, that other than that, and I didn't want that. So I would ask a question, and I would see in the faces of my teachers, both those I didn't much care for and those who were good teachers that I liked, fear. It was just fear. They didn't want to go there. They didn't want to answer my question. And after a while, I got to know some of them, and I found out why. Because you don't know how the rest of the class is going to understand this. Either they would have to say, I don't know, which would be the honest truth for many of them, but a professor does not want to say in a classroom, I don't know, that's just not cool. Mm-hmm. Or they'd have to, if they knew, they'd have to say something that indicated they didn't know really much and they weren't going to do that. Or they would know something. And maybe that would be because they were interested. They did not want the rest of the students to begin to say, oh, Professor Smith, he's interested in it. This is not good for your career. You don't know how this is going to play out, who's going to say what to whom. And I could see in their faces what I later learned because they told me, don't come to my office hours. We're in the office. We can talk about it. But that's how bad it was.
Is it not still?
Pretty much. In my field, the great so-called debate, I mean, I find it boring, but the great debate for my colleagues is between what's called neoclassical economics and Keynesian economics. Neoclassical, the government should stay out of the economy, laissez-faire or liberalism. And the Keynesian saying, no, you crazy neoclassical. If you do that, you'll have Great Depressions and the system will collapse. You need the government to come in to solve the problems, to fix the weaknesses. And they hate each other and they throw each other out of their jobs. One of the very few things they can do together that they agree on is keeping people like me out. That they can find common ground to do. So I had to learn it all on myself. Why am I telling you this? Because this taboo means that all of the complicated developments within Marxism and within socialism of the post-World War II period, the vast bulk of all of that is unknown, not just to the average American person, but to the average American academic, to the average American who thinks of himself or herself as an intellectual. I mean, I have had to spend ridiculous amounts of my time explaining Soviet history. They have no idea. Or saying, there's this man, Lukács, a Hungarian Marxist. He really had interest in, or to explain that Gramsci was not a great literary critic. He was head of the Communist Party of Italy for most of his adult life. What does that mean? Why you like Gramsci as a literary critic, but and they didn't even know. They don't even know. It's been erased. It's a little bit like stories I've heard about Trotsky and his influence kind of erased in the Soviet Union because he obviously fell out of favor. And so somehow all of his writings, many of which are very interesting and complicated. Anyway, so what you're going to have in this country is a slow awakening of socialism from a long hibernation called the Cold War. I never expected, to be very honest with you, that I would live to see. I knew it would come because these things always do, but I didn't expect to see it. So I have been surprised, as have a lot of us, that when it starts to happen, it happens fast.
So you see Bernie as an early sign of the awakening.
Absolutely.
From the Cold War to
right.
Accept the ideas
Bernie
of
was
socialism.
always a socialist. We all knew, and everybody who paid attention, he didn't hide it. But 2016, he makes a decision, momentous, to run for president. He's just a senator from Vermont. Vermont is one of the smallest states in the union. I mean, people who live in Vermont love to tell you that there are more cows than people in Vermont, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah.
So here from this little state, this elderly gentleman with a New York City accent runs for office and says, I'm a socialist. And when they attack him, he doesn't run away. I'm a socialist. I'm a socialist. Now, he had been. It wasn't a secret that suddenly got out. But the great question, and I don't mind telling you because I went to the right schools. I know a lot of people, Janet Yellen was my classmate at Yale and stuff like that. So I was speaking with a high official of the Democratic Party, and I said, well, what do you think about Bernie entering the race? Makes no difference. They get 1% of the vote, right? He was wrong. They had no idea what was coming. But the truth is, I didn't either. It wasn't just that he didn't get it. I thought his 1% was probably right. So we were both wrong.
Yeah, change can happen fast. Do you think AOC might be president one day?
Yeah, possible. But two things. Number one, it's fast. Number two, it's going to go in the following direction, I would guess. You begin with the most moderate, calm, non-confrontational socialism you can imagine.
So not AOC or Bernie.
No, they are not confrontational, in my judgment.
In terms of the ideas of socialism.
Yeah.
I mean, they're both very feisty.
They're feisty personally.
But not
ideologically.
Got
it. Bernie is also, in honest moments, and they both really are pretty honest folks, at least in my experience. In honest moments, Bernie will tell you that what he advocates as democratic socialism is pretty much what FDR was in the 1930s. It was a kind of popular government, tax the rich a lot more than you do now to provide a lot more support for the working class than you do now. That's not a fundamental change. That's what he means by socialism. When he talks about it and he's asked for examples, he mentions Denmark a lot. Okay, that's consistent. That's the softest kind of socialism. And that's where we're going to start in a country coming out of hibernation. Pretty soon, it's already happening, there'll be people who need and want to go further in the direction of socialism than Bernie and AOC are comfortable with. You can already see the shoots of it now. AOC voted together with most of the others to support the money for Ukraine. Okay, that a lot of people in the socialist movement do not support that. And that's going to I don't know exactly how that's going to work out, but that should give people an idea. There are disagreements, and they're going to fester, and they're going to grow.
They don't. People in the socialist sphere don't support money from the United States in the large amounts that it is being sent to Ukraine. Is it because of fundamentally the military-industrial complex is a capitalist institution kind of thing?
No.
I wonder what
I mean, there are some people for whom that's the issue. Then there are people for whom this is, it's guns and butter, and why are we over there when we have such needs at home that are being neglected?
Yeah.
And then there are people who, well, go back to what we talked about at the beginning, who are more like Lenin and Debs. This is a fight between Western capitalism and Russian oligarchs and wannabe oligarchs in Ukraine. And what are we doing here? We have to insist that these forces sit down at the bargaining table and negotiate a settlement. Don't kill large numbers of Ukraine. I mean, everybody's willing to fight to the last Ukrainian. Is a little strange here. What are you doing? You're supposed to be in favor of peace, and for the United States, which just finished invading and occupying Afghanistan and Iraq, to be against another country invading. I mean, who in the world is going to take this seriously? This is crazy. I invade, it's good, and you invade, it's terrible. What? What are you doing? Why are you doing that? What's going on here? All of these questions are being acted, by the way, not just by socialists, by lots of other people too, inside the Democratic Party and also inside the Republican Party. You watch that Tucker Carlson or people like that, they are against the stuff in Ukraine. They don't want the money spent there. They don't want the weapons sent there. They don't like the whole policy. And Trump wobble. So Mr. Biden's policy has got all kinds of critics on the left and the right. And every day that this thing lasts, these criticisms get bigger. Anyway, the point is that AOC and Bernie should be, I think, evaluated as the early shoots after a long winter of Cold War isolation from the whole, when I explain to people the contribution made, for example, to modern Marxism. I'll give you an example. By the French philosopher Louis Althusser. I don't know if the name means anything to you. Okay. He was the rector of the École Normale Supérieure in Paris. That's the equivalent. Imagine in this country if there were a university that combined Harvard, Yale, Princeton, and MIT. I mean, it would be the university. Well, the École Normale in France, in Paris, is the. He was a tenured professor who became the rector. The rector is like the president of the university, an active member of the French Communist Party most of his adult life. That was possible in France during the Cold War. That was unthinkable in this country. You could not, in a million years, right? So Althusser, as a philosopher, tried to bring a version of postmodernism into Marxism with enormous impact all over the world, where he traveled, not just in Europe, all over, all right? So if you want to look him up, I'll spell it out for you.
Sure.
Althusser. Louis. The Louis is spelled Louis. Louis Althusser. Look him up. You'll see tons of stuff. By the way, MIT Press is a major publisher, if I remember, of his works in English. By the way, the textbook I wrote in economics, in case you're ever interested, was also published by the MIT Press.
And the title of the
Contending Economic Theories, Neoclassical, Keynesian,
That's
and
right.
Marxian. That's an MIT.
Marxian.
Yeah, that's right.
And by the way, when we think, I don't know if there's an interesting distinction between Marxian economics and Marxist. I suppose Marxism is the umbrella of everything that...
I only use it because Marxist I use as a noun. A person is a Marxist. Marxian I use as an adjective to qualify, but I don't mean some great difference. There's a last point I would like to make about AOC and Bernie that's also general. I'm a historian too, and I know that the transition out of feudalism in Europe to capitalism was a transition that took centuries and that occurred in fits and starts. So, for example, a feudal manor would start to disintegrate. Serfs would run away. They'd run into a town. How would they live in the town? They had no land anymore because they had run away from the feudal manor. A deal was struck without the people involved in the deal understanding what they were doing. A merchant would say to one of these serfs, I'm in the business of buying and then reselling stuff and living off the difference. But I could make more money if I produce some of this stuff myself rather than buy it from somebody else. So I'm gonna make you a deal. I'm gonna give you money. Once a week, I'll give you money, what we would later call a wage. And you come here and under my supervision, you make this crap that I'm gonna then sell, and this all works out. In other words, there were efforts, unconscious, not self-aware, to go out of feudalism to a new system. Some of them lasted a few days and then fell apart. Some of them lasted weeks or months or years. But it took a long time before the conditions were ready for a kind of a general switch. And once that was done, it grew on itself and became the global capitalist system we have today. That's the only model we have. So for me, that's what I see when I look at socialism. I see the Paris Commune was an event, an attempt. It lasted a few weeks. I see Russia. That was an attempt, lasted 70 years. Then I see, and fill in the blank, I see these are all early experiments. Yeah. These are all, you learn things to do, learn things never to do again. The good, the bad. What do you build on? How do you learn? And that's what the socialist and Marxist tradition, when it's serious, that's what it does.
So in your ideas, sort of capitalism was a significant improvement over the feudalism.
Yes.
And we are coming to an age, and over slavery, and we're coming to an age where capitalism will die out and make, it's not that capitalism is somehow fundamentally broken. It's better than the things that came before it, but there's going to be things yet better, and they will be grounded in the ideas of Marxism and socialism.